We're going to change things up because action, bonus action, reaction, default 30 feet of movement is just a little bit lame or restrictive way to get across the dynamic freedom of combat in a tabletop roleplay game. This is how Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition did it, and then Pathfinder 2e came out with what I thought was a really awesome action point system that they came and upgraded the action economy in the game to this 3 action point system. Well, I'm here to take that, upgrade it again to a brand new action economy system that is quick, tactical, customized, and perfectly balanced. If all that sounds too good to be true, just buckle up and stay with me because it's going to be really interesting. I'm going to be revealing the action economy system in my new tabletop roleplay game, DC20 RPG. For those of you who don't know, this is a brand new game that I'm developing right now that's taking the spirit of 5th edition and everything that I loved about it, because that is where I started my roots in, and I am going outside the box and running with it. I have the freedom now to tackle things that I couldn't before with my other homebrews that I've done on this channel to truly shake up the foundation of things like combat and the action economy there. So if this sounds interesting and you're interested in the DC20 RPG, you can check out the links down in the description, join the rapidly growing community there. I've been absolutely blown away by everyone who has joined, so thank you for that. And if this is interesting too, you could also take these principles and apply it to your Pathfinder or D&D games. Because my first example and design goal whenever I've created my system is to fix the problem of reactions in both systems. Reactions should be far more dynamic, with each character's different classes having different kinds of reactions, things they can do off of their turn to keep them engaged and keep the back and forth feel of a combat slug instead of a slog, because 90% of reactions are just opportunity attacks, and people are just taking opportunity attacks, and that's pretty much what your reaction is. Or if you're a spellcaster, then you take counterspell, and now you're counterspelling as your reaction because your spellcaster reaction doesn't really mean that much. So before we talk about the action economy in the DC20 system, we do have to talk about reactions because they do play a role together. So instead of opportunity attacks only for the marshals and counterspells for the spellcasters, each class should have different cool things. Maybe a subclass has different cool things they can do with their reaction. Maybe defensive tank style players can actually dodge or block and use stuff with their shields as a reaction to actually feel like they're tanking. Or what about cool combos between players? God forbid the players actually intertwine their moves together, where a certain ally comes over and you can spend your reaction type things to do stuff with them. That sounds so cool, and is one of the design goals of DC20 that I think we knocked out of the park. And I'm calling this that we have a dynamic reaction economy. But time out, reactions are broken at the most fundamental level in D&D, and in Pathfinder you have one reaction that you can just use on your turn. I call it a floating reaction because it doesn't take any sort of resources or action economy. You just have it and then you spend it. Similar to a bonus action in combat. If you don't have something that you can do as a bonus action, your turn's kind of just left a little flat and inefficient. So when you build characters, you have to kind of have things for bonus actions that you can do as a bonus action to then do something as an action so you have an efficient turn. And in the same way, if you don't take a reaction on your turn's now less efficient because you never took your reaction. Because it's basically a free attack. If you're standing in combat and something leaves your threatened range and you get an opportunity attack, that came out of nowhere. Do you see what I'm talking about? You have this one reaction that you can either spend or not, and if you don't spend it because nothing situationally happened, that's kind of less optimal, which also causes balance issues. Think of a combat now where you have 4 players versus 4 orcs or something. Let's say that those 4 orcs keep getting all of their reactions. Players keep running in and out of their threatened range, and all these orcs every turn are getting all these reactions spent into free attacks. That's now 4 free attacks that they're getting every time, which is going to really unbalance the combat. Same thing's true for the players. If your players keep getting opportunity attacks because you're trying to run through things and you're trying to create a dynamic moving combat, which you should be doing as a dungeon master, now they're provoking all their opportunity attacks and they're getting all these free attacks out of nowhere. I say out of nowhere because there's this floating reaction that you either use or don't use. And then for spellcasters, we all know how bad counterspell can feel, because then a caster that has their action and they spin their reaction to counterspell, you're spending a reaction, which you may or not even use in the first place, and casters in general don't use them near as often as marshals would. They just freely use their reaction that didn't really matter that much to counterspell someone's full action. Now here at DC20, we're able to think outside of this box and break this box. So in DC20 RPG, we are redefining what a reaction is. You do not have one reaction that you either use or don't. So here's how the action economy works. I'm going to start off with Pathfinder as a foundation for understanding, and then we'll build into showing what the DC20 system is. Pathfinder has 3 action points. If you're not familiar with it, you have 3 action points that you have on your turn, and you can do things like attack and move and other things like that. Each thing you can do takes 1 action point to do, etc., etc. Some spells take 2 action points. It's a really great system. I love it. But I feel it's a little restrictive sometimes, and we'll get to that here. And then Pathfinder 2e also has 1 reaction, which also has all the same flaws that we just talked about. So what we're doing in DC20 is this. Whoa, see what I did there? You have 4 action points in DC20 RPG. You have 4 action points. You can spend it to move, attack, dodge, other things like that, right? And there's a whole list, and we can go on to, if you want to see a video about what things you can do with those 4 action points, that's a whole video. So if you want to see more about this system, share this video with friends, like it, leave me a comment, let me know you want to see this stuff. I really do want to make more videos like this. I could talk about this all day. But anyway, before anybody freaks out and thinks that now you don't have a reaction anymore and you just have 4 action points, well, what about the reactions? You said they were important. Stay with me. So now in combat, you have these 4 action points to be able to spend and do stuff on your turn and do your cool stuff and take your turn in whatever way you see fit with your 4 action points. But if something happens outside of your turn, which is most of the combat, you're only one person of however many things are happening, most of the combat is not your turn, so this will keep you on your toes. In DC20, a reaction is an opportunity to spend one of those action points. If you have, and your character has something they can do that gets triggered, someone leaves your threatened range, sure, opportunity attacks. An ally gets hit and you're standing next to them and you got a shield and you have a feature because you're a fighter or because you took a talent in some way, you can actually do something. So reactions in DC20 are just opportunities. There could be multiple opportunities, and you have an opportunity to spend one of those action points outside of your turn. So now your ally's in danger, you reach that shield across, spending an action point as a reaction, if you want to call it that, right? And you block your shield and they don't take damage. And then maybe a few turns later, another creature leaves your threatened range and you want to make a swing at them. Cool. You spend an action point to make a swing at them. Now your turn comes up. It's your turn to go. How many action points do you think you have now? That's right. 2 action points. You had 4, you spent 2 on reactions for cool stuff that you did to help your allies on the fly, and now you only have 2 action points to spend on your turn, which is also balance. Basically, in combat, your character has a certain amount of things they can do in one round of combat, and it's expressed by 4 action points. If you want to take swings and do other things and spend action points across a round, you can, and it's also quick and balanced. And what I mean by quick is now you have 2 action points you can spend. You spend 1 point to move somewhere and you spend another point to make an attack. Okay, cool, you still had an effective turn, but it's really quick too. Another example with a character has 4 action points and they never spent any action points on reaction opportunities that came across for whatever reason. Maybe nothing ever happened for them and now it's their turn. They have 4 action points and they spend their 4 action points to do stuff. Cool. You could literally build a character in this system that has a whole bunch of different reaction type things, and you've built a character that is reactive based on the battlefield, and maybe that character spends all their action points before it gets to their turn. That's crazy. So then their turn comes up, they have no action points, and their turn's over. So during combat, as the round's going on, you're spending action points either in a reaction or on your turn or whatever, and at the end of your turn, bloop, they reset. Now, your turn's over, so you can't use them again right away. You have to wait till your next turn, and then now, in between turns, you can spend action points possibly on different reaction type things. And let's say you took 1 reaction to do some cool combo with an ally that came over and y'all did some cool combo move. Cool. You got 3 action points. Turn comes back up. You can spend them now. And then at the end of your turn, they reset. Rinse and repeat. Now to get to some concerns that I've heard real quick. I've done live streams already on Patreon where I'm releasing all the rules and patrons get early access to the alpha and beta and all this kind of stuff. All the behind the scenes stuff's over there. And whenever I talked about the action system, we talked about a lot of things and people had some questions. So I'm going to address those right now. The first concern is interruptions. If you have a character that keeps interrupting and there's all these reactions, first of all, that's how reactions work in D&D and in Pathfinder. A reaction interrupts the dungeon master. Like, ooh, I'm going to take an attack. Sweet. That doesn't slow down the game or make it worse. It doesn't make it worse in any way. It has an interruption moment for you to spend your turn. And that character that I talked about that spent two reactions to interrupt, their turn is now shorter when their turn comes back up. And in fact, if you spend all your reactions, your turn is instant and it's done and then you keep going. But that's fine for that player because that player's still engaged. They're looking for opportunity attacks. That's another benefit of this system is you're engaged looking for those moments. Can't do my reactions trigger. Ooh, I got a reaction here. And you do something and spend that action point and now your turn when it comes around is quicker. So there's no loss of time from these interruptions because these interruptions are basically just a player's turn being sprinkled out across the combat. And if you don't like that playstyle, you can build a character that doesn't have a whole bunch of reactions that they can do, and you can just play the game a little bit more simply and keep your 4 actions. And you don't even have to spend the reactions if you don't want to. If a creature leaves your threatened range and you only have 3 action points, they leave your threatened range and you want to do something and you have a plan in your head. We all know what we're talking about as players. You're like, oh, I'm going to do this and this and that. Oh, I can't make that opportunity attack. What a cool dynamic choice you can make. Second concern I want to address is the tracking issue of this thing. And people are like, oh, how do you keep track of your action points and all that kind of stuff? And people have been concerned about it. First of all, it's tracking less things. You have action points. You have 4 of them, yes, but that is one type of thing that you have, and you don't have to worry about a bonus action. What things can I do as a bonus action? Think of new players. What things can I do as a bonus action, can or can't do as a bonus action? Do I have a bonus action? And then the times as a dungeon master, do you want to do anything as a bonus action? There's this moment when you're running off the game, when you're a dungeon master, and they have movement, and they have a bonus action, and they have all these things, and if you, all right, your turn good, because they didn't use anything as a bonus action, do they have something as a bonus action? Do they not? Who knows? With this, you have 4 action points, and there is no such thing as a bonus action. If you do have something, that would probably cost 1 action point to do. And if you're worried about restrictive of certain classes being now restricted and they have to spend action points, a lot of times a class feature might give you the ability that when you make an attack, something awesome happens. And so there's no need to have it be a bonus action. And players also don't have to keep track of if they've taken a reaction or not, because you just have 4 action points. That's it. How much movement do you have left? You don't have to keep track of it because you have action points. Did you spend an action point to gain movement or not? And another solution, action point beads. You have 4 of them. You sit these down in front of you as a player if you're concerned or worried about being able to track these things. You just have these things sitting in your dice tray. Something pops up and you see, oh, a shield block, combo move, whatever you're doing for action point, bloop, move it outside of your dice tray. Now you have 3, and your turn comes up, I have 3 action points. It's very simple. And this is also great for new players because you're like, okay, I need to move, so I'm going to take the move action, and then I only have 2 left. It's very tactical. Feels very good. I'm going to run over here now and take the help action and make the attack action. What a great turn. And now my turn's over now. Bloop, reset. I have 4 action points again. Next person, or if you're not a glass beads type of person, you can just have 4 d20s and have 4 d20s that represent your action points. And a lot of times that might be an attack roll that you're rolling or something that you're, you know what I'm saying? So it could represent the literal things you're going to do with those 4 action points. And you can use these in the same way that you have tokens. Or if you want to track it in a different way, you can just get a simple d6 and just put it on a 4. Now it's on a 4, and if you'd ever do something that causes you to need to use a reaction, boom, now it's a 3. Simple. And another concern that was brought up for dungeon masters is how are dungeon masters going to keep track of all these monsters and all these different things? First of all, in the same way that dungeon masters run spellcasters differently than an actual PC spellcaster, PC spellcasters have spell slots and all these different things, and one of the new things that D&D's released is the new casting system where you either have at will and they can just cast it as much as they want, or once per day. So in a similar vein, dungeon masters will have plenty of tools in DC20 RPG to run off all sorts of monsters. And also think about this, legendary actions that you use off of people's turns are kind of like these action points that we're talking about. And maybe your big villain just simply has 8 action points. That's crazy. If you want to keep it simple, maybe they have 6 action points. And now you can balance the action economy in the points around the player's amount of points. So if you have 3 players at your table and they each have 4 action points, that is 12 action points that team has. And you kind of can know that when you're building out your team. So maybe your big villain has 6 action points and his 3 little minions only have 2 for a total of 12. Oh my God, it's the balance. And with the DC20 system, you can just simply have this big villain go in between players' turns, and that would be their reaction type of opportunity to do something. So now for a new player to play some sort of big villain, it's actually easier because they're used to the action point system that they already have been using. Now they just have more action points possibly, or more reactionable opportunities. And there's also gonna be different ways to run off monsters that have a whole bunch of tools like I'm talking about, but that would be a whole different video. Let me know down below if you want to see that as well. And one big thing I forgot to say when I started talking about counterspell, DC20 counterspells are actually balanced. Because you don't have this random floating reaction that you can spend a random reaction to counter someone's action, everyone has action points. The enemy spellcaster, 4 action points. These people, the player character, 4 action points. So in DC20, there's something called spell duels. And if a spellcaster shoots off a spell, they spent 2 action points. They're shooting off a spell. Most spells cost 2 action points. Some cost 3. Some cost more. Now we'll talk about all that later. But they spend 2 action points to cast the spell. And then this person, there is no such thing as counterspell, because that's lame. They are going to cast the spell to try and counter. There's a fireball and a cone of cold colliding in air. Who's going to win? They each make spell checks, compare them to one another, see who wins. And whoever wins, that spell goes off. Crazy. But now it's still balanced because this person spent 2 action points on their turn. And it got countered by this person spending 2 action points off their turn. And now they still have stuff to do. They can do whatever with their rest of their action points. Who cares? And when it comes back around to this player, they now only have 2 action points. Cool, because everybody's using the same one resource of action points. Do y'all see what I'm saying with this? I feel like this is just revolutionary. But that's what I'm trying to do here, is shake the game up in a new and exciting way, because man, oh man, does combat seem more engaging, tactical, combo-oriented, players coming together, spending action points to be able to go and do so many things. And there's a lot more to this, and I have many more videos I could make on this, and if you really want to find out more and know more, check out the links down below to check out the Patreon. I do full live streams just about every week for my patrons, answer questions, show the new rule reveals, and I'm about to be releasing the alpha really soon. Then the beta will come out, and then the whole thing will be released, but it all takes time and all takes support from you guys, because I am just me with a very small team, and we're trying to do the biggest thing we can and really shake up the game in a game-changing type of way. So thank you so much to everyone who's come out of the woodworks to support this project and this movement. I really appreciate that. And stay creative, think outside the box. Peace.